Okay, so now that I have my entire plan sketched out onto the mat board as to where the windows are going to be cut, I am going to go ahead and start cutting the beveled edges to make the windows in the mat. And so I always start with the outer corners, the outer edges of the pieces first. And so I do that because I can use the scale set for those edges. And so I left this at 3.5, which I used to draw the bottom line. And so basically the lines that I was able to draw with the set scale, I will be able to cut with the set scale in place. The lines that I was not able to use the set scale for, which were the ones to do the dividers for the artworks, for the individual tiny windows, I will have to take the set scale out. So right now it's at 3.5 for that bottom edge. The other thing that I'm going to need is I'm going to need for the beveled edges to put a piece of long mat board underneath the straight edge because otherwise I will get a ragged edge to my window. So I'm going to put that under there. So that way when I cut the beveled edge window, that will be under there. If this is ever looking ragged, we do keep these stored in the long drawers across from the printing press in the back of the room underneath the counter. So if you ever need a fresh one, please, please, please get a fresh one. So that way you get a nice, good cut from your bevel cutter. Okay, and so I'm gonna go ahead and pull my mat over here. And so my arrow is at the top, so I know this is the bottom. This is the part that's going to be cut at 3.5. And so I'm gonna slide this under here and I'm going to push it against the set scale. Okay, so the tricky part is I need to make sure that when I am using the bevel cutter that I start and stop at the correct places. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the bevel cutter. So the bevel cutter is a pull style bevel cutter, and I have 2 hooks right here that are going to run on the track of the straight edge. And so when I am ready to cut with the bevel cutter, I will push this down and pull it. When I'm not using it, like right now when I'm placing it to cut the window, I want to leave that up. The bevel cutter also has a little silver line over here. This is really helpful in knowing when to start and stop cutting with the bevel cutter because you'll see that when I place the bevel cutter, this will line up with my start line before I push the blade in. Then I will push the blade in and pull it until I get to the stop line, and that will be matched up with the stop line when I stop cutting with the bevel cutter. Okay, so the blade is not pushed out, it's inside. I'm gonna go ahead and hook these 2 pieces onto the track. Now that they're hooked onto the track, I'm gonna go ahead and line up this silver line right here. You'll see it, it's nice and bright, indented line in the bevel cutter. I'm gonna line that up with my start edge here. Now that it's lined up, I always place my thumb and forefinger here and here on those 2 pieces that hook onto the track. And then I'm gonna push the blade down into the mat, okay? And then I always use my thumb under here to kind of grip and pull it upward to keep the blade down in. Now, once the blade is in, I'm gonna transfer this hand over to the straight edge to keep the mat board steady. And so I'm just going to be looking at that silver line on the right of the bevel cutter, holding the mat board in place, pulling and cutting. And then once that silver line hits this border line right here, I'm going to stop, okay? Once I stop, I'm going to go ahead and retract the blade up. Okay, if you have any doubt that it cut through, you can always go back and recut it before you move on to the next one. You just wanna make sure that you don't move the mat board at all while you're doing that or before you do that again. You wanna make sure that it's in the exact same place as you did the first cut. Okay, and now that it's matched up, I'm gonna go ahead. I sometimes put my thumb and forefinger here, and then I'll take my thumb and pull the blade out like that. Okay, so I do not wanna cut here. If you cut here, you're not going to have the border for in between your smaller artworks. So now that the blade is up, okay, I can just slide it over and then match up the silver line, thumb and forefinger here and here, insert the blade, use your thumb to pull it upward, push the blade in, move this hand over to the straight edge, pull, okay, until the silver line gets at the next border line. Okay, thumb and forefinger back on the hooks that are on the track. I take my thumb and I just pull the blade out like so. If you want to go over it again, don't move anything. Just move the bevel cutter and then go ahead and repeat. Okay, and then I have one last one for the bottom. For the sides and the top, I want to change the set scale to, you guessed it, 3 inches. Okay. All right, fingertip tight, make sure it's at 3 inches. Okay, I want to make sure that this is underneath, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this side next. Okay, and again, I'm going to make a cut from here to here. I'm going to skip over this 2-inch divider, and then I'm going to cut from here to here. Okay, and so cutting is going to go just as it did before. You always want to match that silver line up with the start line before you insert the blade. When inserting the blade, you always want to make sure that you use your fingers to stabilize it, and then you pull until the silver line meets the stop line, and then retract the blade. I'm going to do this for all the sides and the top, so the left and the right, and then also the top. So here you can see putting the blade in, stopping, lifting the blade, going across the divider, then putting the blade in to cut where the image is going to go again. And then also repeating that for the third at the top of the window mat. Now I have just the one side left to go. Always making sure that whenever you're doing a bevel cut that you have that little piece of mat board underneath for the bevel to sink into as you're cutting. Okay, and this is the last side that I need to cut, and then I will be moving on to the interior cuts that are parts of the dividers. Okay, so the last step is going to be, well, at least for cutting the windows, is going to be to cut the interior cuts where the panes are. So this is where it gets a little tricky. You have to remove the set scale, so I'm going to unscrew that and remove that. So I'm just going to put this to the side. And then I'm going to go ahead and set up to cut the like horizontal ones first. Okay, so the tricky part is that you always want to make sure that the edge that you're cutting the window for is underneath the straight edge. If you don't, your bevel will end up being cut the wrong way. Okay, so I did just finish cutting this bottom one. So if I wanted to slide this just in and not rotate it, I would want to cut on this line, okay? I will have to rotate the mat board to cut on this one, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and always make sure that your extra piece of mat board is in the cutter already, and oh, it just slid out of place, so I'm going to put it back where it belongs. Just want to make sure that that is under where you're going to cut. Okay, so again, because this edge is along this window, I need that border to be under the straight cutter in order for the bevel to be cut in the right direction. And so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to match my line up that I drew there with the straight edge. So I just match it up right like that. Then I'm going to take my bevel cutter, and then you remember that these hook on the track, okay, keep the blade up inside. Once it's on the track, you're gonna use this little silver line that's back here to match up with the start line. Once it's on the start line, thumb and forefinger here, push the blade in. You can pull it up here with your thumb if you'd like. Transfer this hand here, hold the mat board tight, pull, and then you're gonna stop cutting when you get to that divider line. Okay, remove the blade, and then I'm going to repeat it down here. Okay, making sure not to cut the divider. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this one here. And so to do that, because the line that I'm cutting belongs to this window, the border needs to be under the bevel. So that is where it gets tricky. And if you are not sure whether you have it set up right, you can always either review this video or you can of course just have me look at it real quick. And I will help you and I will make sure that you are not going to cut your bevel in the wrong direction. All right, now I need to do the vertical ones on the inside. Okay, and so I'm gonna have to rotate the mat board. Now, if I wanna do this one and this one, I need to make sure that this border is underneath the straight edge. The other thing that you can think of is if you're right-handed and you're standing with the mat cutter, you always wanna make sure that the window is on the right and the frame portion is underneath the straight edge on the left. That is also a helpful way to do this, at least for me. But if you're not sure, you can just always ask. Okay, so I had one window that stuck and that didn't cut, so what I did all the way through, so again, you can always prevent that by cutting twice. I am going to take this X-Acto knife and I'm just gonna very, very carefully run it through the mat, and so you just wanna hold it at a 45-degree angle to do that, and then I have this corner which is stuck. Okay, not so bad, that actually popped out then. Okay, so I have these little pieces. I'm gonna put them to the side. And the next thing I'm gonna do is just talk to you about taping your artworks into the window mat.